Fox News Alert, President Trump's sharing of sensitive information with the Russians, just the latest in a string of controversies to dog the Trump administration, with contradictions emerging in the statements offered by the president and by his senior staff. Many lawmakers and strategists from both parties suggest the White House has lost control of its message and that something has to change. Let's talk about it with Leslie Marshall, a syndicated radio host and a Fox News contributor. Brad Blakeman served as deputy assistant to President George W. Bush. You know that you have to run a tight ship in the White House, Brad. Is this president contradicting his own advisors in the statements about this Russia information?
No, I think he's clarifying it, and he's doing it quickly. And what he's saying is that nothing untoward went on with any release of information he gave to the Russians. And I can tell you by experience, many times presidents will disclose classified information to adversaries as well as allies in an effort to try and get them to do what's in the best interest of the United States, or in this case, not only the United States, but our allies and those affected around the world. Now, John, there are two things as a lawyer that really are important to me. One is intent, and the other is motive. The intent of the leaker was to get this information out in public, and the motive was to hurt the president. This is an anonymous person, and if he really was aggrieved by the top secret information that he alleges the president released to an enemy, then why didn't he follow the intelligence community's own review internally? He didn't do that. The meeting was barely over, and he went to the Washington Post. I say that the leaker did more damage than what he's alleging the president had done. The president did nothing wrong, and by the way, the problem we're having is with leakers. They need to be brought to justice.
Well, you'll get agreement on that from the president's national security advisor, H.R. McMaster. He was just in that rather extraordinary news conference about an hour ago, asked whether he stood by his assertion that the story the Washington Post first published is false. Here's what he had to say.
I stand by my statement that I made yesterday. And what I'm saying is really the premise of that article is false, that in any way the president had a conversation that was inappropriate or that resulted in any kind of lapse in national security. And so I think the real issue, and I think what I'd like to see really debated more, is that our national security has been put at risk by those violating confidentiality and those releasing information to the press that could be used connected with other information available to make American citizens and others more vulnerable.
So, Leslie, where do you come down on this? I have a feeling I know, but the argument is that it's the leaking of the information, says Brad, that matters here and not necessarily what the president told the Russians.
I don't agree. Oh, I think it's dangerous when people are leaking, especially anything revolving around national security. The problem is, what is the president leaking, if you will, and feels that he has complete carte blanche to do so on any topic with anyone. And although technically correct, who he speaks to and about what and when is very much an issue. If he speaks to Russia, which we are not clear is truly an ally, is not an ally with Syria, is not an ally with North Korea, and when we have an ongoing investigation that was headed up by an FBI director who was just dismissed by this very president, I think that those in Washington, both left and right, are accurate to question this, to question the accuracy. So many people running to the mic and saying this is what happened, then the president tweeting things that, contradict that. We need a transcript, not we, Congress needs a transcript so that our elected officials can put Americans' minds at rest and ease and tell us the truth, because we don't feel we're getting that with all the contradictory information that seems to come out of the White House and Twitter.
Brad, in that news conference with H.R. McMaster, he said that the president was very tough on the Russians regarding Ukraine and Crimea and some of those other issues that have bedeviled the relationship between the two countries for some time, but that he then, toward the end, got into an area where both countries pretty much see eye to eye, and that's on the battle against ISIS.
Right.
And he says that whatever information was released was open source information, basically the kind of stuff you can read in newspapers.
Absolutely. We've been talking about laptops not being allowed on planes bound for the United States from certain countries. The Russians were victim most recently of an airline being blown out of the sky. So it's in our interest to try and get the Russians to cooperate more. Isn't that what the president is supposed to be doing in the war on terror, is to gain support, not lose support? And if this was a way of getting the Russians' attention to step up and do more in their interest and ours, why wouldn't the president do that? But it's not up to a bureaucrat who is not elected by the people, to release top secret information, code word top secret, by the way, which is our most vital, and then release it to the public. By the way, I think the leaker did more damage to our security than what is alleged to have been done by the president. I think the president has every right to use whatever he deems is necessary within his constitutional authority, which this is, in order to keep Americans safe. And I know that's what his intent was.
Toward that end, Leslie, he just had a meeting with the Russian foreign minister. He's hosting the Turkish president right now. He's going to be meeting with the leaders of Saudi Arabia and Israel and the Palestinian Authority in the coming days. It does seem that peace and security is very much his central focus right now.
The problem with that, John, is not only who he's meeting with. When you look at Turkey, that's becoming less of a free society and a democracy, which is something that we pride ourselves and want to lead the world in. When you look at some of the actions of this man and the questionable, some would say, counts in the votes of that election. And it's also, to me, very questionable when you have the president saying one thing and trying to institute travel bans on certain countries, and then meeting with leaders of Muslim nations. So quite frankly, I don't know how much peace we're going to get when there has been a lot of non-peaceful rhetoric over the past year during the campaign and even since the president took the oath of office as commander-in-chief.
Just a note for our viewers, this is footage just fed into the Fox newsroom of the president, the vice president, his secretary of state, and other administration officials meeting with their cross-table counterparts, the president of Turkey and his delegation, obviously in the White House today for some high-level discussions. Going to have to say goodbye there. Leslie Marshall and Brad Blakeman, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts with us today.